They handed me a badge at my son's wedding. One word. Leftover. Not mother of the groom. Not even my name. Just leftover. The wedding planner looked me up and down. Asked if I was with catering. Ethan saw me from across the crystal-filled hall. Walked over slowly. Each step deliberate. Could I step aside for photos? I didn't fit their visual balance. Could I sit by the kitchen doors? The staff needed access. Could I not mention Dad in any speeches? Grief brought down the mood. I watched my son marry a woman who'd never learned my name. Who called my house outdated. My furniture heavy. My memories inconvenient. They seated me where dirty dishes went. Between the garbage bins and the swinging doors. The wedding photographer circled past me. Twice. Like I wasn't there. I was invisible. Forgotten. Erased from my own son's most important day. I dropped the badge in the trash. Walked away. The teacup slipped from my hand. Shattered. Cold silence followed. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. 63 years old. Widow. Mother of one. That's what I was when they handed me that badge. Black letters on white plastic. Leftover. Not mother of the groom. Not Ruth Calder. Just leftover. Like day-old bread. Like something forgotten in the refrigerator. The wedding hall sparkled with crystal. Chandeliers cast dancing shadows on marble floors. Guests laughed. Cameras flashed. Champagne bubbles caught the light. I stood in my navy dress. The one I'd pressed twice that morning. The one I'd bought specifically for this day. My son Ethan stood under those chandeliers. His arm locked tight around Alicia's waist. She wore white silk that cost more than my monthly pension. Her veil flowed like water. Like money. They looked perfect together. Everyone said so. The photographer circled them like a shark. Click. Flash. Click again. Ethan saw me watching. His smile faltered for just a moment. Then he tilted his head toward the back of the hall. A subtle gesture. Almost invisible. The staff entrance. That's where mothers like me belonged. I understood. I always understood. The guest list lived in a shared sheet. VIP. Family. Overflow. Alicia didn't like the word overflow. She replaced it with leftover. The printer pulled the column as is. No one proofread that row. Ethan saw the digital proof and typed one word back: fine. They thought I carried no leverage. Harold dead, his money earmarked for them. So tidying the view felt harmless. Harmless is just a word people use before the bill arrives. Alicia's parents stood in the front row. Her father wore a $1,000 suit. Her mother's jewelry caught every light in the room. They belonged there. They had earned their place through money and connections. I had earned mine through 27 hours of labor. Through midnight fevers and scraped knees. Through college tuition paid in overtime shifts. But earning and deserving are different currencies. The minister began to speak. His voice echoed off the vaulted ceiling. I couldn't hear the words from where they'd placed me. Near the kitchen doors. Where the staff rushed past with silver trays. The smell of catered salmon mixed with industrial cleaner. My stomach turned. I remembered Ethan as a boy. 7 years old, running to me with bloody knees. "Mama," he would cry. "Make it better, Mama." I always did. Band-aids and kisses. Hot chocolate and bedtime stories. Now he stood 30 feet away and wouldn't meet my eyes. The ceremony continued. Guests dabbed at their eyes with silk handkerchiefs. Beautiful tears for a beautiful moment. I felt nothing but the weight of that badge in my purse. Evidence. I would keep it as evidence. When Harold died, I thought the worst was over. Cancer had taken him slowly. Piece by piece. Month by month. But at least we faced it together. This felt different. This felt like amputation without anesthesia. Alicia had visited my house exactly 3 times. Each visit, she commented on something. The old furniture looked heavy. The family photos seemed dated. The whole place felt stuck in the past. Ethan would translate later. She just likes modern things, Mom. Clean lines. Minimalism. Minimalism meant erasing me. The rehearsal dinner had been worse. They seated me near the swinging kitchen doors. Staff bumped my chair every few minutes. I ate cold soup while important people made toasts. The wedding planner approached me twice. Both times, she asked if I was with the catering company. I was not invited to the dress fittings. Not invited to the cake tasting. Not invited to choose flowers or music or anything that mattered. Ethan called me 2 nights before the wedding. His voice was tight with something I couldn't name. Anxiety, maybe. Or shame. He had a favor to ask. A small thing, really. Could I please not mention Dad in any speeches? Alicia's family found grief uncomfortable. It brought down the mood. I listened to him breathe through the phone line, waiting for my answer. Harold had built everything. The house. The business. The college fund that paid for Ethan's education. But mentioning dead husbands was bad for the atmosphere. I said yes. I always said yes. But after I hung up, I opened my safe. Inside were documents they'd never bothered to ask about. Loan papers with my signature. Property deeds with Harold's name. Financial guarantees I'd co-signed when Ethan needed startup money. Harold hadn't been a romantic spender. He'd bought early shares in Langston Development when others called him conservative. Cancer took him, but those certificates remained. Over 2 years, my lawyer and I had structured these holdings into something more powerful. Trustee rights. Purchase options. Trigger clauses for suspicious transfers between related accounts. Cold paper. But paper with teeth. The vows ended with a kiss. Applause filled the hall like thunder. I watched my son's face disappear behind Alicia's veil. When they separated, he was smiling at someone else. Not me. Never me. The photographer herded family members into position. Alicia's side filled the frame. Beautiful people with expensive smiles. Perfect teeth and perfect skin. Ethan looked around briefly. His eyes found mine across the room. He walked over slowly, each step deliberate. Could I step aside for the photos? The composition worked better without me. I didn't fit the visual balance they wanted. I understood. I always understood. I moved to the gift table instead. Placed my small white envelope among the ribbons and gold cards. No bow. No flourish. Inside that envelope were 3 simple instructions. Documents I'd prepared with my lawyer weeks before. The bridge loan trigger would activate automatically. Leonard's personal guarantee was ironclad. The account freeze required only submitting evidence to the bank's compliance department. Transfer patterns below reporting thresholds. Clear audit trails. Everything documented and notarized. The penthouse cancellation was simpler. Harold's early investment in Langston Development had given me trustee authority. What they thought they owned had always been mine to reclaim. I watched them cut the cake. Watched them dance their first dance. Watched them accept congratulations from people who mattered. A waiter approached me near the exit. Young man with tired eyes and flour on his apron. "Excuse me," he said. "Are you with waste disposal?" I smiled at him. My first real smile of the evening. "Yes," I told him. "I am. Because I was taking out the trash." If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. 10 o'clock sharp. My phone began to ring. I was making oatmeal. Steel-cut oats, the way Harold taught me. Slow cooking. Patience. The phone buzzed against the kitchen counter. Ethan's name lit up the screen. I stirred the oats. Added a pinch of salt. Ring, ring, ring. I turned the heat to low. Covered the pot. The ringing stopped. Started again immediately. This time it was a number I didn't recognize. Then another. Then 3 more. I poured my coffee. Black. No sugar. The way I'd learned to drink it when Harold got sick. when luxuries became expenses we couldn't afford. By 10:30, I had 23 missed calls. The oatmeal was perfect, creamy, warm. I ate it slowly at Harold's place at the table. His chair still creaked when the house settled, still held the impression of his body. The phone lit up again. This time it was Leonard Voss, Alicia's father. I knew his voice from the rehearsal dinner. Loud, confident, used to being heard. He'd left a message. His voice was different now. Smaller, tighter. "Ruth," he said through the tiny speaker. "We need to talk. There's been some kind of mistake." No mistake. Just mathematics. I deleted the message. Made myself another cup of coffee. The morning news was playing on my small kitchen television. Local anchors with perfect hair discussing traffic patterns, weather updates, sports scores. Then a different story. Business news. A hospitality startup under federal investigation. Suspicious fund transfers. A family trust facing margin calls. They showed a photo of Ethan and Alicia from yesterday. Still in their wedding clothes. Still smiling. The anchor's voice was neutral. Professional. Just facts. But I heard the subtext. Money missing. Accounts frozen. Dreams crumbling. I changed the channel. Found a cooking show instead. An elderly woman was making apple pie from scratch. Her hands moved with practiced certainty. Rolling dough, peeling fruit, adding just enough cinnamon. She reminded me of my mother. Same careful movements. Same quiet concentration. My mother had lived through the Depression. She understood the difference between wanting and needing. Between having and deserving. She would have approved of what I'd done. The doorbell rang at 11:15. I looked through the peephole. Leonard Voss stood on my front porch. His expensive suit was wrinkled. His tie was loose. Behind him sat a black sedan. Engine running. Driver waiting. I opened the door. Kept the chain latched. Leonard's face was gray. His eyes were red-rimmed and desperate. He asked if we could talk. Just for a few minutes. There had to be a way to work this out. I told him there was nothing to work out. The contracts were clear. The payments were due. He offered money. More money than I'd ever seen. Numbers that made my pension look like pocket change. I asked him if he remembered what he'd called me at the wedding. He looked confused. Said he didn't recall speaking to me at all. That was the problem, I told him. He hadn't spoken to me. Hadn't seen me. Hadn't thought I mattered. I closed the door. Turned the deadbolt. Through the window, I watched him stand there for 10 minutes. Just standing. Staring at my door like it might change its mind. Finally, he walked back to his car. The sedan pulled away slowly. Defeated, I went back to my coffee. Back to the cooking show. The elderly woman was now making caramel sauce. Sugar and butter melting together in a heavy pan. She stirred constantly. Patient, careful. One wrong move and the whole thing would burn. My phone rang again. This time it was Alicia. Her voice was different through the tiny speaker. Raw, desperate. All her polished confidence stripped away. She called me names I won't repeat. Accused me of destroying innocent people. Of ruining lives out of spite. She said I was bitter. Jealous. Unable to accept that Ethan had found happiness. She was wrong about the jealousy. Wrong about the bitterness. I wasn't bitter. Bitter implied I still cared what they thought of me. This was something colder. Something more precise. This was accounting. I deleted her message too. By noon, the story had spread. The compliance team had acted within hours. Bank regulations don't wait for feelings. I wasn't working from thin air. As co-guarantor on that loan and Harold's limited partner in his estate, I had the right to request transaction records. I'd also paid a forensic auditor to map those small, repetitive transfers into charts that compliance couldn't ignore. I'd drawn every small repeated transfer into time sequences. given them to a forensics team familiar with anti-laundering rules. At midnight, my lawyer delivered the complete package to the bank's compliance inbox. When automated systems detect scattered but repetitive anomaly patterns, internal alarms double instantly. My lawyer had submitted the evidence at midnight. Transfer records, pattern analysis, threshold violations. The bank's internal alarms had done the rest. Wedding empire collapses overnight. Voss family trust under investigation. Hospitality startup files emergency bankruptcy. I made myself a sandwich. Ham and Swiss on wheat bread. The same lunch I'd packed for Ethan every school day for 12 years. He'd complained about it then. Said the other kids had better lunches. More expensive lunches. Now I ate it alone. Tasted the same as it always had. The afternoon brought more calls. Reporters, lawyers, people I'd never heard of asking for comments. I unplugged the phone from the wall. The silence was immediate, complete. I could hear the refrigerator humming, the clock ticking on the wall, my own breathing. This was what peace sounded like. At 3 o'clock, someone knocked on my door. Gentle, hesitant. I looked through the peephole. Ethan stood alone on my porch. No expensive suit today, just jeans and a wrinkled shirt. His hair was uncombed. His eyes were hollow. He looked like he had when he was 7. When he'd scraped his knee and needed his mother. But I wasn't his mother anymore. Not according to the way he'd treated me. Not according to the badge they'd given me. I watched him through the glass. Watched him raise his hand to knock again. Watched him let it fall. He stood there for 20 minutes. Sometimes he'd start to leave. Then he'd come back. Finally, he pulled out his phone. Typed something. Put it away. My phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. A text message. Mom, please. We can fix this. I'm sorry. I read it twice. Deleted it. Went back to the window. Ethan was walking to his car. His shoulders were bent. His steps were slow. He looked back once before getting in. Looked right at the window where I was standing. I didn't move. Didn't wave. Didn't acknowledge him at all. He drove away. That evening, I made Harold's favorite dinner. Pot roast with carrots and potatoes. Simple food. Honest food. I set 2 places at the table. His and mine. Ate in the silence we'd shared for 42 years. The kind of silence that comes from truly knowing someone. The kind they'd never understand. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. They wanted to meet. Of course they did. Leonard called 18 times on Tuesday. Left 12 messages. Each one more desperate than the last. Ruth, please. We're reasonable people. We can work something out. Reasonable people don't hand out badges that say leftover. Your wife typed it. You saw the proof. You wrote fine. I finally answered on the 19th call. Leonard's voice cracked when he heard mine. Relief mixed with panic. He asked if we could sit down together. Hash things out like adults. I told him I'd meet them at First National Bank. Downtown branch. Tuesday at 2. The marble lobby. No chairs. No comfort. Standing room only. I arrived early. Wore my gray wool suit. The one I'd bought for Harold's funeral. It still fit perfectly. The security guard nodded at me. I'd been banking there for 37 years. Same teller windows. Same vault door. Same heavy silence that money creates. Ethan arrived first. Alone. His face was pale. Stubble covered his jaw. He'd been crying. I could see the red rims around his eyes. He started walking toward me. Arms half raised like he wanted a hug. I stepped back. Kept the distance. He stopped. Let his arms fall. Mom, he said. His voice was small. Broken. I told him my name was Mrs. Calder. We weren't family anymore. Not after what he'd done. Leonard and Alicia came through the glass doors together. Alicia wore dark sunglasses. Designer jeans. A silk scarf that probably cost more than my monthly groceries. She looked smaller than she had at the wedding. Fragile, like expensive china with hairline cracks. Leonard wore another expensive suit. This one was pressed. His tie was straight. He was trying to look in control. But his hands shook when he reached for his briefcase. I had prepared 3 envelopes. Simple manila folders with their names written in block letters. Ethan's envelope was thin, just 2 pages. The first page showed every transfer he'd made to Alicia's shell company. Voss Influence Limited. 23 payments over 8 months. Always just under the reporting threshold. Clever boy. Not clever enough. The second page was a bill. Professional services rendered by Ruth Calder Financial Consulting. 27 years of motherhood. Itemized. Midnight feedings. Doctor visits. School clothes. Piano lessons. College tuition. Total amount due everything he owned. Alicia's envelope was thicker. Bank records. Property transfers. A web of financial connections that would take federal investigators months to untangle. But I'd had years to study them. Years of being invisible while they planned their future. Years of listening to phone calls they thought I couldn't hear. Leonard's envelope contained 1 document. The bridge loan agreement. His personal guarantee. Due immediately upon default. Default triggered by suspicious activity in related accounts. Activity I documented, photographed, notarized. They read in silence. The only sounds were pages turning and the security guard's footsteps echoing off marble walls. Alicia finished first. Her hands were trembling. She called me a monster. Said I was destroying innocent people out of spite. I corrected her. I wasn't destroying anything. I was collecting debts. 27 years of debts. Ethan looked up from his papers. His eyes were wet. Mom, please. We can pay you back. Whatever you want. I told him what I wanted was already gone. Respect. Acknowledgement. A place at my own son's wedding that wasn't next to the garbage bins. You can't buy those things, I said. They have to be freely given. Leonard tried to negotiate. He offered money, properties, stock options, a seat on his company's board. Numbers that would have made me wealthy, comfortable, secure for life. I asked him if he remembered the badge they'd given me. He looked confused. Said he didn't understand what I was talking about. That was the problem. He didn't remember because I hadn't mattered enough to remember. None of them had bothered to learn my name, or notice where they'd seated me, or care that I existed at all. Until now. Now they knew my name. Now they understood exactly who Ruth Calder was. I reached into my purse. Pulled out 2 checks. $1 amounts. Made out to Ethan Calder and Alicia Voss. Their inheritance. Everything they'd get from me. Ever. Alicia tore hers up. Let the pieces flutter to the marble floor. Ethan folded his. Put it in his wallet. I watched him do it. Watched him choose to keep something. Even something worthless. Maybe there was still a part of him that remembered being my son. But it was too late for maybe. Leonard tried one more time. He talked about family. About forgiveness. About moving forward together. I told him I didn't have a family anymore. Family doesn't hand out badges that say leftover. Family doesn't make you stand by the kitchen doors at the most important day of their life. Family doesn't ask you to pretend your dead husband never existed. The meeting was over. I walked to the door. My footsteps echoed in the vast lobby. Behind me, I heard Alicia crying. Leonard's voice trying to soothe her. Ethan saying my name over and over. Mom, Mom, Mom. But I wasn't anyone's mom. Not anymore. I was Ruth Calder, creditor, collector of debts. Outside, the afternoon sun felt warm on my face. Downtown traffic moved in its normal patterns. People walked past with coffee cups and cell phones. The world continued, unchanged. But inside that marble lobby, 3 people were learning what it felt like to be erased. What it felt like to become nothing. I walked to my car. Started the engine. Drove home to my empty house. Made myself a cup of tea. Earl Grey, Harold's favorite. Sat in his chair by the window. Watched the shadows grow longer across the yard. Soon it would be evening. Soon I would make dinner for one. But first, I had more papers to file. More debts to collect. The accounting wasn't finished yet. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. The headlines came faster than I expected. Legal procedures and compliance mechanisms have their own rhythm. Some actions can freeze accounts and issue investigation alerts within hours. Others require days or weeks for liquidation processing. But the key trigger points, bank compliance warnings and trust buyback options, were activated the same night. The following days were just the overture to their collapse. Wednesday morning, coffee still hot in my cup. The local news website refreshing every few minutes. Wedding empire crumbles in federal investigation. Hospitality startup files emergency bankruptcy. Voss family trust liquidated by court order. I read each article twice. Memorized the details. The language was clinical, professional, bloodless. But I knew what those words meant in human terms. Dreams ending. Futures cancelled. Lives reduced to legal paperwork. The same way they'd reduced me to a badge that said leftover. My phone had been quiet since I'd unplugged it. But the mailbox filled with letters. Lawyers, reporters, people I'd never heard of. All wanting to know why. Why had I done this? What had driven a 63-year-old widow to destroy her own son's life? They didn't understand. This wasn't destruction. This was subtraction. Simple mathematics. They had mispriced me. They priced me at grief and habit. They forgot grief can hold deeds. Habit can hold keys. Take away respect. Take away acknowledgement. Take away love. What remains? Nothing. That's what they'd given me. So that's what I gave back. Thursday brought photographers to my front yard. Men with long lenses hiding behind my neighbor's hedge. I closed the curtains. Made my breakfast in lamplight. Scrambled eggs. Wheat toast. Orange juice from concentrate. The same breakfast I'd made for Ethan every school morning for 12 years. He'd complained then. Said eggs were boring. Said the other kids had better breakfasts. Pop-Tarts. Sugary cereals. Things that came in shiny packages. I'd ignored his complaints. Made eggs anyway. Protein was important. Nutrition mattered. Now I ate alone. The eggs tasted exactly the same. The doorbell rang at 9:30. Then again at 10. Then continuously for 5 minutes. I looked through the peephole. A young woman with a microphone. A man with a camera. More strangers wanting explanations. I went upstairs instead. To Harold's office. He'd died in the hospital. But this room still smelled like him. Old Spice aftershave. Coffee stains on legal pads. The leather chair that molded to his back. His desk was exactly as he'd left it. Bills in neat stacks. Checkbook balanced to the penny. Everything organized. Everything accounted for. Harold had taught me that numbers don't lie. People lie. Emotions lie. Promises lie. But numbers tell the truth. The truth was in the folders I'd hidden in his file cabinet. Years of documents. Contracts. Loan applications. Financial statements. Every penny Ethan had borrowed. Every guarantee I'd co-signed. Every risk I'd accepted to help him build his dream. Dreams that hadn't included me. I pulled out the folder marked Calder Foundation. Papers I'd prepared months ago. Before the wedding. Before the badge. Before I'd understood how little I mattered. The foundation wasn't improvised charity. It was structured giving. Trust documents signed. Board members appointed. Initial funding arranged through asset liquidation. I wasn't running this alone. A former city social services director had agreed to serve as executive director. 3 experienced program managers handled the logistics of turning money into shelter and meals. Professional operations. Not amateur revenge. The penthouse they'd planned to buy. The one they'd posted about online. Their dream home. Their fresh start. It was mine now. Harold's early stake in Langston Development had given me the authority. Transferred legally to the Calder Foundation for Abandoned Seniors. Harold's early shares included purchase options and trustee clauses. In Langston's corporate charter, when related accounts showed default or major compliance risks, trustees could invoke early buyback options. I exercised those rights through trust structures and layered holding companies. The transaction completed within legal frameworks. Irreversible. Seniors who'd been forgotten, discarded, treated like leftovers. The irony was perfect. My lawyer had called Tuesday evening. The transfers were complete. Legal. Irreversible. Ethan and Alicia would read about it in tomorrow's papers. Along with everyone else, I heard cars leaving outside. The reporters giving up, moving on to fresher scandals. The house settled into its usual silence. Refrigerator humming, clock ticking, my own breathing the only human sound. This was what victory felt like. Quiet, empty, precise. Friday morning brought new headlines. Mystery buyer acquires luxury penthouse for senior housing. Calder Foundation established with multi-million-dollar gift. Anonymous donor creates warming center for forgotten elderly. They didn't connect it to me. Not yet. The foundation's paperwork was buried in legal language. Corporate structures. Shell companies within shell companies. But property transfer records always leave breadcrumbs. Reporters pulled corporate filings, traced trustee numbers, made phone calls. A few public trust documents later, the trail led to my front door. When they did figure it out, they'd understand the final lesson. Blood is biology. Family is choice. Legacy is accounting. I'd chosen to rewrite all 3. My morning routine continued unchanged. Coffee, oatmeal, local news, weather forecast. The temperature was dropping. First freeze expected next week. Time to bring in the garden hoses. Drain the outdoor faucets. Harold had always handled those tasks. Winterizing. Preparing for the cold. Now I did them alone. Slowly, carefully. The way he'd taught me. The afternoon mail brought 3 letters. Legal envelopes with law firm logos. Ethan's bankruptcy attorney. Alicia's family trust lawyer. Leonard's corporate counsel. All asking the same questions. All demanding the same answers. How had I known? When had I planned this? What did I want? I threw them away unopened. What I wanted was already gone. Had been gone for months. Maybe years. The woman who'd raised Ethan. Who'd loved him unconditionally. Who'd believed family meant something. She'd died the day they handed her that badge. What remained was Ruth Calder. Widow. Creditor. Foundation trustee. A woman who understood that respect can't be bought. Love can't be forced. Family can't be faked. And debts must always be repaid. Evening came early now. November darkness falling before 5 o'clock. I made Harold's favorite dinner again. Pot roast. Mashed potatoes. Green beans from the garden. Set 2 places at the table. His chair. Mine. The silence between us was comfortable. Familiar. Built from 42 years of shared meals. He would have approved of what I'd done. Harold believed in consequences. In standing up to bullies. In protecting what mattered. He would have understood that sometimes love looks like letting go. Sometimes it looks like walking away. Sometimes it looks like making sure they never forget you forgot them first. The pot roast was perfect. Tender. Seasoned just right. I ate slowly. Savored every bite. Tomorrow would bring new headlines. New questions. new attempts to understand what I'd done. But tonight, I was simply Ruth Calder, having dinner with her husband. In the house they'd built together. In the silence they'd earned together. Complete. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. Winter came early that year. First snow fell on a Tuesday. Fat flakes that stuck to everything. The kind of snow that makes the world look clean. Fresh. Innocent. I watched it through Harold's office window. Watched it cover the photographer's footprints in my yard. Erase the tire tracks from their vans. Nature has its own way of starting over. My morning routine stayed the same. Coffee, oatmeal, news. But the headlines had changed. Calder Foundation opens first warming center. Mystery donor revealed as local widow. Ruth Calder from wedding guest to philanthropist overnight. They'd figured it out, connected the dots, traced the money back to me. The reporters were calling me a hero now. A champion of forgotten seniors. A woman who'd turned personal tragedy into public good. They didn't understand. This wasn't heroism. This was bookkeeping, balancing the ledger of my life. The phone calls started again. Different voices this time. Foundation administrators, social workers, seniors needing help with heating bills. I answered them all. Mrs. Chen, 84, living on cat food. Because her pension wouldn't cover both groceries and gas heat. Mr. Rodriguez, 79, sleeping in his car. Because his son had moved to Phoenix without telling him. Mrs. Williams, 91, whose daughter visited twice a year. And complained the whole time about the smell. Stories I recognized. Stories I understood. We were all leftovers in someone's life. The Calder Foundation could help them. Would help them. That was the point. That was the final entry in my accounting book. Tuesday afternoon brought an unexpected visitor. I saw her through the kitchen window. Walking slowly up my front path. Careful steps on the snowy sidewalk. Alicia. Alone. No designer clothes today. Just jeans and a worn winter coat. No makeup. Hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She looked younger this way. More human. Less polished. I opened the door before she could knock. We stood there for a moment. Looking at each other. Neither of us speaking. She asked if she could come in. Her voice was quiet. Different than I'd ever heard it. I stepped aside. Let her pass. The kitchen felt smaller with her in it. More crowded. Like adding furniture to a room that was already complete. She looked around. Took in the old appliances. The worn linoleum. The photographs of Ethan as a boy covering the refrigerator door. This was what minimalism looked like when you couldn't afford anything else. She asked if she could sit down. I nodded toward Harold's chair at the table. She sat carefully, hands folded in her lap, eyes focused on the placemat. I poured myself coffee, didn't offer her any, waited. She told me she'd been reading about the foundation, about the warming centers, the senior housing project, the meal delivery program. All funded by money that had once been theirs. She said she understood now. Why I'd done it. What I'd been trying to tell them. I corrected her. I hadn't been trying to tell them anything. I'd been trying to survive them. There's a difference between teaching and defending yourself. She nodded. Said she deserved that. Then she asked if there was any way to fix this. To make amends. To find some path forward. I told her the path was already chosen. The foundation was established. The money was spent. The damage was permanent, just like the damage they'd done to me. She started crying then, not the dramatic tears from the bank. Quiet tears, the kind that come from understanding something that can't be unchanged. She said she was sorry. Said they'd been wrong. Said they'd treated me badly and she knew it. I listened without responding. Sorry doesn't unprint a badge. Doesn't unseat someone from the kitchen entrance. Doesn't bring back a place at your own son's wedding. Sorry is just a word people use when they finally understand the cost of their choices. She sat there for 20 minutes, crying quietly into Harold's coffee cup that I'd set in front of her. Finally, she asked if she could see Ethan. I told her Ethan was my son. Had been my son. But I didn't have a son anymore. That part of my life was closed. Accounted for. Filed away. She stood up slowly, walked to the door, turned back once. She said she hoped someday I could forgive them. I told her forgiveness was a luxury I couldn't afford. Forgiveness required believing people could change. I'd spent 63 years believing that. It had cost me everything I had. She left without another word. I watched her walk down the snowy path, get into an old sedan I didn't recognize, drive away into the gray afternoon. Then I washed Harold's coffee cup, dried it carefully, put it back in its place. Evening came with more snow. Heavier now, the kind that would make driving dangerous. Good. That meant no more unexpected visitors. I made dinner for one. Grilled cheese and tomato soup. Comfort food for a winter night. Harold would have made jokes about the weather. About getting snowed in together. About having an excuse to stay close. I ate in his silence instead. The kind that says everything without words. After dinner, I worked on foundation paperwork. Applications for funding. Requests for help. Stories of people who'd been forgotten. Each application was someone's last hope. Their final chance to matter to somebody. I approved them all. Mrs. Chen would get her heating bill paid. Mr. Rodriguez would get temporary housing. Mrs. Williams would get daily check-ins from a social worker who actually cared. The abandoned would be remembered. The leftovers would be fed. The forgotten would find warmth. That was my legacy now. Not the son who'd disowned me. Not the family that had erased me. The foundation would outlast all of us. Would keep helping long after I was gone. Numbers don't die. Accounts don't break your heart. Foundations don't hand out badges that say leftover. They just serve. Quietly. Efficiently. Without judgment. The way I wished my family had served me. The snow kept falling outside my window, covering everything in clean white silence. By morning, the world would look different. Softer. More forgiving. But underneath the snow, the ground would still be frozen. Some things never truly thaw. I turned off the lights. Locked the doors. Went upstairs to bed. Tomorrow would bring more applications. More stories. More people who needed help. The accounting would continue. But tonight, the books were balanced. Finally balanced. After 63 years. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. Spring came quietly that year. No fanfare. No sudden warmth. Just the slow retreat of winter into memory. I noticed it first in Harold's garden. Tiny green shoots pushing through the last patches of snow. Determined. Patient. Unstoppable. Life continuing whether we notice it or not. The foundation had been running for 4 months now. 37 seniors housed. 42 heating bills paid. 18 prescription programs funded. Numbers that meant something. Numbers that mattered. My phone rang less frequently now. The reporters had moved on to fresher scandals. The lawyers had accepted that their clients were bankrupt and beyond saving. Ethan hadn't called in 6 weeks. Good. That made things cleaner. Simpler. Final. Thursday morning brought a letter I wasn't expecting. Expensive stationery. Heavy paper. My name written in careful cursive across cream-colored envelope. Inside, an invitation. Leonard Voss requests the honor of your presence at a memorial service for his daughter Alicia Marie Voss. The paper felt cold in my hands. Alicia was dead. The details were sparse. No cause listed. No location given. Just a date. Next Tuesday. 2 o'clock. Private service. Family only. But they'd invited me anyway. I read it 3 times. Set it on Harold's desk. Stared at it for an hour. Then I called the number printed at the bottom. Leonard's voice was barely recognizable. Hollow, aged, broken in ways that money couldn't fix. He thanked me for calling. Said he wasn't sure I'd respond. Wasn't sure I'd care. I told him I didn't care about Alicia. But I cared about understanding the end of the story. He was quiet for a long time. I could hear him breathing through the phone line. Then he told me what had happened. Over the following months, Alicia had lost everything. The bankruptcy proceedings took weeks. The asset seizures took longer. She'd been living in a studio apartment. One room, shared bathroom down the hall. The kind of place college students rented when their parents couldn't help anymore. She'd been working as a cashier at a grocery store. $8 an hour. No benefits. No future to speak of. The glamorous life she'd planned was gone. The influence. The connections. The comfortable certainty that money brings. She'd started drinking more. Sleeping less. Talking to herself in the checkout line. Leonard had tried to help. Offered her a room in his house. A small allowance. Some temporary support while she got back on her feet. She'd refused. Said she couldn't live with charity. Couldn't accept handouts from the father who'd failed to protect her from me. 3 weeks ago, she'd stopped answering her phone. Her landlord found her on a Sunday morning. Pills scattered across the kitchenette counter. Empty bottle of wine. Note addressed to no one. The note was brief. Leonard read it to me over the phone. I'm tired of being nothing. Tired of not mattering. Tired of being forgotten. This is easier than starting over. I listened without comment. The silence on his end cut through me like a blade. In that instant, I understood that any victory had been stained gray. I'd won the war and lost something indefinably human. But understanding doesn't equal regret. I understood the weight of that cost. It sat like a cold, heavy coin. Value clear, but cutting to hold. Understanding isn't remorse. I wasn't without feeling. I just filed feelings into ledger sheets. Categorized. Numbered. Entered. Leonard asked if I understood what I'd done. If I grasped the full cost of my revenge. I told him I understood perfectly. I hadn't wanted her dead. I'd wanted her to understand what being discarded felt like. But understanding and surviving are different skills. Alicia had chosen to erase herself rather than rebuild. The same choice she'd tried to force on me. The irony was precise. Complete. Unintended but mathematical. Leonard hung up without saying goodbye. I sat in Harold's office until evening. Watching shadows move across the floor. Listening to the house settle around me. Then I walked to the kitchen. Made dinner for one. Ate in silence. Tuesday came gray and drizzly. The kind of weather that makes everything look tired. I dressed carefully. Black wool dress. Pearl earrings. The same outfit I'd worn to Harold's funeral. The memorial service was held in a small chapel. 15 people scattered across 50 chairs. Leonard in the front row. Ethan 3 rows behind him. I sat in the back. Near the door. Ready to leave at the first sign of drama. Ethan saw me. His face went pale. His hands started shaking. He stood up. Started walking toward me. I shook my head once. Pointed to his seat. He stopped. Stared at me for a long moment. Then walked back to his row. The service was brief. Generic. A minister who'd never met Alicia reading scripture about forgiveness and redemption. No one gave a eulogy. No one shared memories. No one cried. We were all strangers here. Brought together by guilt and obligation rather than love. When it ended, I walked outside without speaking to anyone. Ethan followed me to the parking lot. Mom, he called. We need to talk. I turned around. Looked at my son standing in the drizzle. Hair plastered to his head. Suit wrinkled and cheap. He looked older than his 32 years. Worn down. Defeated. Broke in every sense of the word. I told him my name was Mrs. Calder. We'd established that months ago. He ignored the correction, asked if I was happy now, if this was what I'd wanted. I corrected him again. I hadn't wanted anything. I'd simply collected what was owed. Alicia's death wasn't my responsibility. It was the natural consequence of her choices. Choose to treat people like garbage. Risk being discarded yourself. Choose to erase someone from your life. Risk being erased in return. Simple accounting. Ethan started crying then, standing in the rain outside his ex-wife's memorial service. Crying like the 7-year-old boy he'd once been. He said he was sorry. Said he'd made mistakes. Said he understood now how badly they'd hurt me. He begged me to forgive him. To give him another chance. To remember that he was still my son. I looked at this broken man who shared my blood. Who'd grown in my body. Who'd called me mama for the first 7 years of his life. Then I walked to my car. Ethan called after me. Mom, please, don't leave me with nothing. I stopped. Turned back one final time. Told him I'd left him exactly what he'd left me. Nothing. The mathematics of that equation would never change. I drove home through the gray afternoon. Made tea. Sat in Harold's chair by the window. Outside, spring continued its slow arrival. Buds forming on the maple tree. Grass starting to green. Life persisting despite everything. The foundation paperwork waited on my desk. More applications. More forgotten people needing help. I had work to do. The accounting was never truly finished. But today, the books were balanced. Perfectly balanced. 0 on both sides of the ledger. Nothing owed. Nothing given. Nothing left. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. 1 year later, I received another invitation. Not to a wedding this time. To a groundbreaking ceremony. The Calder Foundation Senior Housing Complex. Breaking ground on the lot where Ethan's restaurant once stood. The irony was not lost on me. I wore my navy dress. The same one from his wedding. It still fit perfectly. The mayor spoke first. Talked about community. About caring for our elderly. About the generous anonymous donor who'd made this possible. I stood in the back. Invisible again. But by choice this time. Mrs. Chen was there. The woman who'd been living on cat food. She looked healthier now. Warmer. Fed. She found me after the ceremony. Took my hands in hers. She said the foundation had saved her life. Given her dignity. Made her feel human again. I told her she'd always been human. The world had just forgotten to notice. She cried then. Right there on the sidewalk. Tears of gratitude I'd never seen before. Harold would have liked her. He'd always had a soft spot for fighters. The construction crew arrived the next morning. Big yellow machines tearing down what was left of Ethan's dreams. I watched from my kitchen window. Sipped my coffee. Felt nothing but satisfaction. By noon, there was only empty ground. Clean. Ready for something new. Something better. The foundation kept me busy. Applications arrived daily. Stories of forgotten people who needed help. Each one reminded me why I'd done what I'd done. Mrs. Patterson, 87, whose son visited twice a year and spent the whole time asking about her will. Mr. Kim, 73, living in his car because his daughter said he smelled like old age. Mrs. Franklin, 92, whose grandson put her in a home and sold her house without telling her. Leftovers. All of us. Discarded by the people who should have loved us most. But the foundation gave us purpose. Gave us value. Gave us a way to matter. Spring became summer. Summer became fall. The seasons turned without drama or fanfare. Just the quiet passage of time. The steady rhythm of meaningful work. I established a scholarship program. Full college funding for students whose parents had abandoned them. Kids aging out of foster care. Young people with nowhere to go. They would never be leftovers. Not on my watch. The first recipient was a girl named Sarah, 18 years old, living in her car since her mother's boyfriend decided he didn't want kids around. She reminded me of myself at that age. Determined, scared, alone. I met her at the scholarship ceremony. Small gathering at the foundation offices. No reporters, no cameras, no fanfare. Just a girl getting a chance at a future. She thanked me afterward. Said she'd never forget what I'd done for her. I told her the best way to thank me was to succeed. To build something good. To remember where she came from. And when she had children of her own, to treat them like they mattered. That evening, I made Harold's favorite dinner again. Pot roast, carrots, potatoes. Set 2 places at the table. His chair, mine. But this time, the silence felt different. Fuller, more complete. We'd built something together. Something that would outlast both of us. The phone rang during dessert. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. It was Ethan. His voice was different, older, broken in places but healing in others. He'd been in therapy for 8 months, he said. Working construction for the same duration. Living in a studio apartment with thin walls and no air conditioning. The bankruptcy had taken 4 months to finalize. The federal investigation another 2. He'd spent weeks trying to find investors. Calling old contacts. Begging for bridge loans. Nothing worked when your name was associated with financial irregularities. Learning what it felt like to be forgotten. To be nothing. To start over with nothing. He said it was the best education he'd ever received. I listened without comment. Let him talk until he ran out of words. Then I told him I was glad he was learning. Growing. Becoming someone better. But I also told him it was too late for us. The woman who'd been his mother had died the day they handed her that badge. What remained was Ruth Calder. Foundation director. Scholarship administrator. Guardian of the forgotten. I had work to do. People to help. Lives to save. He understood, he said. He wouldn't call again. I believed him. After I hung up, I sat in Harold's chair by the window. Watched the evening shadows stretch across the yard. The maple tree had grown taller this year. Stronger. Its roots reaching deeper into the soil. Like the foundation. Like the work I'd built. Like the legacy I was leaving. Numbers on a ledger. But numbers that meant something. Numbers that changed lives. Mrs. Chen had her own apartment now. Heat that worked. Food in her refrigerator. Dignity in her old age. Mr. Rodriguez had found housing. A job at the foundation. Purpose in his later years. Mrs. Williams had visitors now. Foundation volunteers who actually wanted to spend time with her. Who listened to her stories. Who treated her like she mattered. Sarah was starting college in the fall. Engineering degree. Full scholarship. A future she'd earned. The abandoned had been found. The leftovers had been fed. The forgotten had been remembered. That was my accounting now. Not revenge. Not bitterness. Not punishment. Service. Purpose. Legacy. The numbers balanced perfectly. I opened Harold's desk drawer. Pulled out the badge they'd given me at the wedding. Leftover. Black letters on white plastic. I'd kept it as evidence. Proof of what they'd done. Motivation for what I'd become. But I didn't need it anymore. I walked to the kitchen. Turned on the gas burner. Held the badge over the blue flame. It melted slowly. Plastic curling. Letters disappearing. Smoke rising toward the ceiling. When it was gone, I opened all the windows. Let the autumn air sweep through the house. Fresh start. Clean slate. New beginning. Tomorrow would bring more applications. More forgotten people needing help. More lives to save. The work would continue. The foundation would grow. The legacy would endure. But tonight, I was simply Ruth Calder. Widow. Mother to no one. Friend to the forgotten. In the house Harold built. At the table we'd shared. In the silence we'd earned. Complete. Balanced. At peace. For the first time in 64 years. The books were finally closed. And the new ledger was ready to begin. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. 5 years have passed since that wedding. I am 68 now. Gray hair silver in the morning light. Lines deeper around my eyes. Hands spotted with age. But steady. Still steady. The foundation runs itself these days. Good people doing good work. Mrs. Rodriguez manages the housing program. Mr. Kim oversees meal delivery. Sarah graduated summa cum laude and runs our scholarship division. The forgotten taking care of the forgotten. The way it should be. This morning brought a letter I didn't expect. Cream-colored envelope. My name in careful script. No return address. Inside, a wedding invitation. Sarah Michelle Patterson and David Lee Chong request the honor of your presence. Sarah, my first scholarship recipient. Getting married. At the bottom, a handwritten note. Ruth, it said. I wouldn't be here without you. Please come. You're the closest thing to family I have. I set the invitation on Harold's desk. Next to his reading glasses. His coffee mug. His fountain pen that still held ink after all these years. Family. Such a complicated word. I'd learned that blood doesn't make family. Loyalty does. Respect does. Showing up does. Sarah had shown up. Every semester. Every achievement. Every milestone. Sharing her victories with the woman who'd believed in her. The woman who'd seen her potential when no one else would. That afternoon, I went shopping. First time in 5 years I'd bought a dress for someone else's wedding. Soft blue silk. Simple cut. Elegant without trying too hard. The kind of dress Harold would have liked. The kind that says you matter. You belong. You're welcome here. Saturday arrived bright and clear. Perfect wedding weather. I drove to the venue slowly. No rush. No anxiety. Just anticipation. The ceremony was small, intimate, held in a garden behind an old Victorian house. White chairs arranged in gentle curves. Flowers that smelled like hope. Sarah saw me arrive. Her face lit up like Christmas morning. She broke away from her photographer and ran to me. Careful not to wrinkle her dress. But not caring about anything else. She hugged me tight, whispered thank you in my ear. Called me her guardian angel. I corrected her gently. I wasn't an angel. I was just someone who'd learned the difference between being needed and being used. Between being valued and being tolerated. Between being family and being related. The ceremony began at 3 o'clock. Sarah walked down the aisle alone. No father to give her away. No mother to adjust her veil. But she wasn't alone. Not really. The foundation family filled the first 3 rows. People who'd been forgotten and found each other. Mrs. Chen dabbed her eyes with a handkerchief. Mr. Rodriguez beamed like a proud father. Mrs. Williams clapped her hands together and smiled. We were her people, her chosen family, her real family. The minister spoke about love that endures. About commitment that lasts. About building something together that's stronger than what you can build alone. Harold and I had built something like that. 42 years of shared meals and quiet conversations. Of supporting each other through loss and celebrating small victories together. Sarah and David were starting that journey now. With their eyes wide open. With realistic expectations. With the wisdom that comes from having survived being unwanted. They would treat each other well. They'd learned what it felt like to be discarded. After the ceremony, Sarah found me again. Introduced me to David's parents. Told them I was the reason she was in college. The reason she had a future. The reason she believed she deserved good things. David's mother thanked me. Said they'd heard so much about me. About what I'd done for Sarah. About the foundation. She asked if I had children of my own. I paused. considered my answer carefully. I told her I had hundreds of children, scholarship recipients, foundation beneficiaries, people who'd been forgotten and found their way back to mattering. They weren't my blood, but they were my legacy, my family, my purpose. The reception was held in the same garden. String lights hung from old oak trees. Tables set with simple white linens. Food that smelled homemade and tasted like love. I sat at the family table, between Mrs. Chen and Sarah's college roommate. Part of the inner circle. Included, valued, seen. No one handed me a badge. No one asked if I was with the catering company. No one made me sit by the kitchen doors. This was what belonging felt like. What being wanted felt like. What family actually meant. During dinner, Sarah stood to make a speech. She talked about second chances. About people who believe in you when you can't believe in yourself. About a woman who'd turned her own pain into purpose. Her own rejection into redemption. She raised her glass to toast me. Called me the mother of her heart. The person who'd taught her that your worth isn't determined by who claims you. It's determined by who you choose to become. The crowd stood to applaud. Faces turned toward me, eyes full of warmth and gratitude. I felt Harold's presence beside me. His approval, his pride, his quiet satisfaction at work well done. After the reception, I helped clean up. Folded chairs, packed leftover flowers, swept the garden paths. The same tasks I'd done at church socials and community events for 40 years. But this time, people worked alongside me. Thanked me for helping. Treated me like I belonged there. Sarah and David left for their honeymoon at 10 o'clock. She hugged me one last time. Promised to send postcards. Vowed to name her first daughter Ruth. I told her to name her daughter whatever made her happy. But to raise her knowing she mattered. Knowing she had value. Knowing she deserved to be seen. I drove home through quiet streets. Past the lot where the senior housing complex now stood. Lights glowing in windows. People inside living with dignity. With warmth. With purpose. Past the community center where foundation volunteers served free dinners. Where forgotten people gathered to remember they were human. Past the scholarship office where young people learned they had futures. Where abandoned kids discovered they had worth. The city was full of lives I'd touched. Stories I'd changed. People who mattered because someone had finally noticed them. At home, I made tea. Earl Grey, Harold's favorite. Sat in his chair by the window. Looked out at the garden we'd planted together. Still growing. Still blooming. Still beautiful after all these years. The wedding invitation sat on the coffee table. Proof that good things could grow from broken ground. That family could be chosen. That love could be learned. That mattering could be earned. I thought about Ethan sometimes. Wondered if he'd found peace. If he'd learned to build instead of take. If he understood the difference between success and worth. But I didn't regret my choices. Didn't wish things had been different. Didn't spend time on what might have been. The foundation would continue after I was gone. The scholarships would keep giving young people chances. The housing would keep sheltering the forgotten. The work would outlive me. The impact would continue. The legacy would endure. Numbers on a ledger. But numbers that meant everything. Numbers that proved one person could matter. Could make a difference. Could change the world. One forgotten soul at a time. The tea was perfect. Warm. Comforting. Exactly the way Harold had taught me to make it. I raised the cup to the empty chair across from me. To the man who'd shown me what real family looked like. To the partnership we'd built. The love we'd shared. The foundation we'd created together. Tomorrow would bring new applications. New stories. New people who needed to know they mattered. But tonight, I was exactly where I belonged. In the house love built. At the table respect set. In the silence acceptance created. Complete. Balanced. Whole. The books were closed. The story was finished. And it was a good story. A story worth telling. A story worth living.